everybody! Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I'm Gerzybow, and this is our workshop. This is the basics and essentials of cinematic storytelling. And so, without further ado, let's hop right into it. So, this is going to take just a moment to update, but yeah, so it may give or take about 6 seconds, so bear with me. But yeah, so what exactly is this workshop thing all about? So what exactly are we going to cover here, really? Well, really, we're going to be going over some of the fundamentals of filmmaking, really. So with filmmaking, there's actually a lot that goes into it. So for this workshop, we're actually going to be focusing a little bit more on the cinematography side of things, with a little bit here and there. We're also going to go over how to control where your audience is looking, being able to understand where to control where the audience is going to be placing their eyes on. And we're also going to take care of how to compose a shot. So things like shot types, or as well as different kind of basic camera moves and frame guides and little things like that, as well as basic framing guides. So little kind of rules, like being able to properly frame your shot effectively and accordingly. And also going to cover focal lengths. So really understanding the difference between like a wide focal length and a telephoto focal length and things like that. As well as, last but not least, how to get started in VR chat filmmaking. So for those of you who are just starting out and things like that, feel free to come on in and stay tuned. So I guess a little bit about myself. Hi guys, I'm Gerzybow. I'm one of the studio executives at Porno Media, a VR chat film studio, and I'm also media team lead over here at Project Community. And for the record, one of our directors, Chris Conning, he really wanted me to put award-winning up there. I'm a little humble about it, but technically, I did help lend a hand in helping Project Community win a Telly Award this year. It's been a major achievement for ours, and I'm super grateful for it. And for a little bit more about myself, I have the Bachelor of the Arts degree in digital cinema with a minor in animation. So, basically, I did go to film school. All 4 years of it, and so I have a fair amount of filmmaking and video production experience. I've worked on a number of different kinds of projects, whether it be from short films to music videos to things like weddings or documentaries and commercials alike. I've also worn a lot of hats in filmmaking as well. I dip my toe into a lot of areas, so whether it be like in the camera department, maybe working with the red camera or things like that, as well as things like editing and VFX and pretty much about the whole shebang, really. So, needless to say, I've done a lot of things, and some people may call that a generalist. And there's also a couple terms for it too, things like generalist or digital media specialist. So, in a way, that's kind of how I am. So, just to kind of kick things off, we're going to start off with that word cinematic. Like, what even is cinematic? Like, what does that even mean? Now, of course, we can probably take a look at the dictionary definition, right? However, if one were to look closely, you may notice that it actually doesn't really tell you all that much. So, like for example, showing a high level of artistry. Well, what kind of high level of artistry? Having qualities or techniques associated with different kind of good movies and things like that. Well, what kind of qualities and techniques? So at the end of the day, because there's so much that can go into that word cinematic, we're just kind of left with kind of like a what scenario. What does all that mean? And so some professionals in the film industry would kind of like cringe at the word cinematic because it could be such an ambiguous term. Like it can mean so many things. So like, how do we really go about defining what is, well, cinematic really? For me personally, I like to describe, instead of cinematic, I like to use words like maybe visually intense or organic even. And so, speaking of organic, we're going to go over what is the goal of cinematography. So, really, at the end of the day, a lot of us kind of have their own approach when it comes to the goal of cinematography. And so, this is kind of my own little definition when it comes to it. And for that being, to be able to visually communicate images that feel organic, cohesive, and remain true or authentic to the emotional core of your story. Now that right there, that kind of sounds like a whole can of worms right there, right? I mean, organic, making something feel natural, cohesive, to make it feel like it makes sense, like it belongs in this story. True or authentic, being able to communicate something honestly, and that can sound a little philosophical there too. And so a lot of that just really comes down to understanding the psychology of your scenes, really understanding what is going on in your story, and being able to translate that visually. And that could be in a lot of places too. So, such as like the psychological or emotional states of your characters. What are they feeling in this situation? What are they going through? Some backstory and things like that. As well as the stakes of your scenes. Like, what's at stake here? Is the guy going to get the girl, or is the world going to end? Little things like that. As well as the direction of your story. Where's your story heading? Where is it going? Can it be going in this direction or that direction? Or maybe there's a special twist that's happening. As well as underlying themes. What is your story really about? What is is there anything that that kind of overarches the entire story? Maybe there's some underlying symbolism there that you like to visually describe. As well as who owns the scene. Whose scene is it? Is it the main character scene? Maybe it's the good guy. Maybe it's the bad guy scene. Or maybe it's a special side character scene here and there. And so a lot of that really comes down to, well, empathy. Empathy at the end of the day is pretty much key to really being able to have your audience really connect with your story, and having those visuals really match the tone and the emotions and really the underlying message that you want to tell. And so this is why your cinematographer or director of photography, as a lot of us like to call it, they have to read your script in order to tell your story in the most visually honest way. And so, and this really means just having your audience experience your story rather than just watching it, having them feel like a participant in your story rather than just a spectator. And so, how do we go about this kind of stuff? Well, let's take a look at an example. So this right here is, well, once it comes up, is a shot from one of Portal Media's films that we worked on. This one is called What If Life Was a Fever Dream? And so this is one of my personal favorite shots from the film. And so here, let's take a look, shall we? One shows. Mysterious, now shall we? So let's take a look into this. Let's dive in. Let's really deconstruct and see what exactly went into that kind of shot. And a little fun fact about What If Life Was a Fever Dream, that's a project where actually a lot of our shots, everything from the cinematography to the story to the direction, the dialogue, the performances, the characters, was, believe it or not, improvised on the spot. And so a lot of our shots, when it comes to this film, we kind of have to be quick on our feet into what we want to shoot and things like that. So let's dive in. Let's kind of see what exactly happened with this shot right here. So right here we have a character that sees something that the audience doesn't see. Now, that right there, it kind of sparks a little curiosity to the audience. It creates this kind of wonder feeling, kind of like what. Kind of makes us wonder, like, what exactly is this guy looking at? And so then this is followed by a camera movement, an arc kind of camera movement, where the camera starts to orbit around this character, followed by a hit sound effect with like a little bass drop sound effect to kind of indicate that there's a sudden change in the tone, a change in the atmosphere. And so this move right here, it kind of builds anticipation for this big reveal. We still don't even know what this guy's even looking at yet, and yet this movement creates this world-spinning kind of feeling. It creates that feeling of disorientation to really get into this character's head to feel like, whoa, what is this guy feeling right here? And then ultimately, it all culminates in the big reveal, where we went from a kind of like a medium close-up of this character to a over-the-shoulder shot, where now we see who this character's looking at, who is he looking at, and then you hear that bram sound effect to give off the feeling that something's not quite so right about this guy. And then boom, you got it. And right there with a combination of both visuals and a little bit of sound design here and there, you have a shot that just at the end of the day just feels really, really just like emotionally kind of engaging and a little bit suspenseful too. And actually, to kind of backtrack a little bit, some of the most scary or terrifying or even the most hilarious moments in a film isn't always what the audience sees, but rather what the audience doesn't see. And so, speaking of what the audience sees, we're not going to go over what attracts the audience's eyes. So, how do we really go about controlling where our audience is looking? Well, there's a few ways you could do about it. So here, let's jump in, we'll find out. So, to kind of kick things off, we have the brightest part of the image. So this kind of goes without saying, but however, the brightest part often likes to bring focus to our subjects. Some of us we like to look at bright and shiny things. But yeah, having a subject that is well lit often draws our eyes towards that subject. Mm-hmm. And so contrary to brightest part of the image, we then have backlighting, or the darkest part of your image. Now, so what's really nice about backlighting is that you're able to use light as a way to kind of give shape and dimension to your subject, and that can be in a lot of ways too, whether it be through something like the sky, like in this example from 300, or maybe it's a train at nighttime, kind of like this example from Assassination of Jesse James. So really being able to kind of use lighting to your advantage as to how you want to shape your subject and in order to bring attention to where you want your audience to look. And so next up we have colors. Now there's actually a lot that kind of goes into colors, but without getting too complex about it, a lot of it comes down to really the most vibrant or saturated scenes of your shot, and using things like contrasting colors, being able to use things like teal and orange or red and green, and as well as taking advantage of using vibrant or saturation colors to bring focus to something. So take for example this shot here from Amelie. You have a lot of orange and a lot of orange in this shot, and yet here you have this really vibrant like blue lamp right there. It kind of just stands out a lot, right? Almost kind of draws your eye towards that lamp. And yeah, so there's different ways you could do it, whether it be through contrasting colors. You can also use a single color palette, like in this example from Mandy right here, where everything is just like so red to really kind of match the tone of what your scene is about. And you can also get creative with it too. You can also combine colors with different techniques, such as lighting right here. So like this example here from Macbeth, where you have this character right here, almost kind of in silhouette, being like backlit by this yellow-orange looking background right here. And here he is, his silhouette is just like so like vibrantly reddish saturated, and that's what gives that shape and dimension, kind of really draws your eye to that character. And yeah, just being able to use a combination of things to create that duotone color look is some of the many ways that you can go about really just capturing your attention. And next up right here, this kind of speaks for itself, but an object that's in focus, or really something that has the most detail. And it could be areas that, well, have the most texture at the end of the day. Me. Next up we have contrast, having areas with the most contrast in the image. And this can be, oh my, apologies. But yeah, what's really cool, it's really cool about contrast, sorry about that. But yeah, really being able to really take advantage of the range of crushed blacks to bright highlights. So that can be done through a couple ways really, whether it be through like high contrast color grading, whether like this example here from 300, or through lighting, like in this example here from Schindler's List. And followed by contrast, we have human-like figures. And at the end of the day, we are human, we are people. And so often we like to connect ourselves with other people on the screen. And so we like to identify with really other people, or really anything that resembles a person. It can be an actual person, like example from Blade Runner, or it can be something that kind of resembles a person, maybe a humanoid, something like the shadows here from Tree of Life, or maybe something that's kind of blurred, just kind of obscured, but kind of looks like a humanoid figure from Sunshine. And followed by human figures, we also have organic or living things. So things like whether it be there's like an animal on screen, so maybe whether it be like a cat or a shark, or maybe a fish or a doggo. it could be and really anything that is that's a living or breathing thing. Sometimes we are also drawn to those sort of things. It could be something human, like an infant's foot from Tree of Life, or it could be something inhuman, like a xenomorph from Alien. And this right here is a bit of a joke, but we also have Wilson, the volleyball. It's really amazing. Yeah, Wilson. Yeah, it is amazing how a film like Castaway can make an audience really feel emotionally attached to something like a volleyball. It's really fascinating and highly recommend. And next up we have a character's eyes. Now this is a really big one. And there's a little old saying that goes around that says eyes are the window to the soul. And that really does say a lot, because in a way, when we are looking into a character's eyes, we're looking into their inner emotions, their inner psyche. We get a better understanding as to what they're feeling and what they're going through. And so, and a lot of the times, we're actually more drawn to a character's eyes than what's around them. So take, for example, the shot here from Drive. Technically, that light in the elevator is the brightest part of the image. Yet, however, we are actually more drawn to Ryan Gosling's eyes right here. Not just because he's Ryan Gosling, but it's mostly because of the turmoil that this character is going through, specifically with this scene in particular, which I will not spoil, is super fantastic. But yeah, and so next up we got leading lines. And here, just a moment here. And now we got leading lines. So really being able to take advantage of the environment that's around you to draw attention to where you want your audience to look at. So examples like here from Kill Bill, like being able to use a bridge to use those lines along the railings to have them converge on the main character right here, where you want your audience to look at. And same goes for things like 2001: A Space Odyssey, having like really taking advantage of everything that's around you to frame your shot, to looking for anything that's in your environment, using lines and things like that to draw your attention towards the thing that you want them to look at. And last but not least, we have movement. Now, movement often indicates that's life in motion, or maybe the passing of time, really. And so really anything that's kind of like moving on the screen, odds are your eyes are probably going to be drawn towards that thing that's moving. And that could be things like a spinning top from Inception, or maybe a giant spaceship from Star Wars. And yeah, so those are just some of the few ways that you can actually control where your audience is looking. So next up, we're going to go over how to compose a shot. But before I go into that, I just want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to one of the people on the team, Gerzybow. So Gerzybow, she made a really wonderful video over on how to use the stream camera, as well as going over different shot types and cinematography and things like that. She's done a really awesome job, and it's incredibly well made. Highly recommend checking out if you guys ever have time. So a lot of the things I'm going to be covering here, you can also find in Gerzybow's video. So feel free to stop on by. So yeah, first things first, we're going to go over shot types. So kicking things off, we're going to take things back, like way back, like extreme wide angle back, right? So maybe you want to showcase the scale of your environment, or maybe you want to make a character feel small or isolated, like this example here from Star Wars, making C-3PO just feel alone in the desert. And maybe you want to give scale to something, maybe like something that's gigantic, like a sandworm from Dune. So now we're going to get a little closer, just a slight bit closer. How about a wide shot or a full shot, where your character's entire body is shown from top to bottom, taking up the entire vertical space of your frame. Little things like that. Maybe you want to showcase the entirety of your character to show the audience who they are entirely. Getting a little closer, we have a medium wide shot, where the camera is framing them for about knee highs upish around there. Now we're going to cut a little closer. How about a medium shot, where your characters are framed from the round waist high upish, kind of like around there. Very common kind of shot. And next up, we got a little closer, even more closer, like a medium close-up, where the camera is framing their subjects to about kind of the torso to the bust area upish around there. Now Now we're gonna get even more closer, a little bit more intimate. This, in a way, we're getting even more close to our characters, like a close-up, like these examples here from Kill Bill or Silence of the Lambs, where the character's face is taking up the entirety of their shot. And this can be great for like some whether it be from like intimate moments or very like emotional moments of your scene. But we're not done yet. We're gonna get even more closer. How about an extreme close-up? Something like maybe focusing on a particular body part, maybe like a character's eye, maybe something like another close-up, like a character's finger or hand. And let's get a little unique here. We got some different kind of shots right here. So how about a cowboy shot? So in this case, a cowboy shot is usually framing their character from about mid-thighs up-ish around there. It's a bit of a rare kind of shot, but it's something that you see here and there. Followed by that, we have an establishing shot, where, well, kind of in the name, establishes the space of your scene, the location of where your scene is going to take place. And going from establishing the space, we also got our insert shots. Insert shots are a pretty unique one. In some ways, this can be a little hard to describe, but to kind of put it briefly, an insert shot is basically like an extreme close-up of a certain part of your scene that relates to your master shot. Your master shot being the shot that takes over the majority of your scene. But let's say you want to frame two people, like maybe more than one person. Well, you got yourselves a two-shot, where you got both characters taking about an equal amount of space in your scene. And you can also do this with more than two people too. You could do a 3-shot or a 4-shot or even an entire group shot. Apologies. But let's say maybe you want to get even more unique about it. Maybe super experimental. Well, you can also do a POV shot. And what's really cool is that you can also tell your story in first person, like in this example here from Hardcore Henry. Or maybe you want to tell your story in third person, like an example here from Enter the Void. And yeah, and with the power of what we do here in VR, you can actually you don't even need a stream camera. You can probably even tell your story with using just your POV even. But let's go back to like taking things back. So for example here, we have an eagle or a bird's eye view. Now this one's kind of like an extreme high angle, where it's basically very far away. Maybe you want to make the audience feel like they're kind of peering in on something from very far away. Maybe almost like they're a spy, like in this example here from the conversation. Or maybe give the audience a sense of kind of like a God's eye kind of view. Almost like a sense of superiority, like an example here from Mystic River during a very emotional scene. And next time we're going to cover angles. So we're going to cover like how different ways you can kind of angle your kind of camera. And so to kick things off, we have an eye level angle, where basically everything is level. At the end of the day, there is an even playing field. So it's really this is pretty common for a lot of your shots. So whether it be something like, well, yeah, just keeping things level really. Apologies. And so how about we get a little low? Maybe like a low angle. Maybe you want your character to feel a sense of power, or maybe have a sense of suspense or an epicness to your scene. And well, that's where low angle can come in. Oh yeah, there he goes. But let's say maybe you want to get a little higher. Maybe you want to go with a high angle. What do you want to do with a high angle? So maybe you want your character to feel a sense of inferiority. Maybe they're in a tough situation and they feel a little bit weak. Or maybe they're up against some really big odds. Maybe you want to make them feel a little small. But how about we get a little weird here? How about like canted or Dutch angle, where the camera's just framed just off at a low angle to get the feeling of uneasiness or disorientation. Maybe something isn't really quite right, or something is just a little off about something. And that's where something like a canted or Dutch angle can come in. And now we move into camera movements. So there's a lot of different ways that you can move your camera in order to really tell your story the most effectively as possible. And so And what's really cool about this part, we have animated GIFs, and this way we can better visually demonstrate how we go about camera movements. So kicking things off, we have a pan, where the camera is moving from horizontally from left to right or right to left and things like that. Maybe you want to follow a character and things like that. Followed by, we have a tilt, where the camera is tilting from up to down or things like that. And I have a little joke right there, because it's pretty common that you hear somebody in the film industry say pan up. It's actually tilt up. And after tilt, we also have a dolly shot. And now this is and there's different ways you can kind of call this, whether it be through a dolly or a tracking shot and things like that. But really, at the end of the day, it's a lot of it just comes down to following, being able to following a character or just following through a scene. Now let's get unique here. So we got something that's called a crane, or sometimes it's called a boom or a jib. So this right here in the bottom right is a piece of film equipment. It's often called a crane or a jib. And this is what the film industry uses to achieve these kind of shots that you see right here. So whether someone says, "Oh, I want the camera to kind of boom up," or maybe crane down, or things like that, this is usually what they kind of mean by that, where the camera's kind of moving like up and down in vertical space and things like that. So let's go back to that fever dream shot for a moment. Remember how I mentioned that the camera's kind of arcing around the character? Well, we also have an arc shot. And so in this case, this is where the camera is, whether it be through a point of interest around a character. I often kind of use the term point of interest quite often, but it's usually focusing on a certain subject, and then it's kind of orbiting around that particular area of interest. So you can do this through whether it be an x-axis, or maybe get a little fancy with a y-axis. Now let's go back to getting weird again. How about a snorri cam shot? And believe it or not, this is something you can actually do right here in VR chat. This right here in the top left is a behind the scenes look of what a snorri cam rig looks like, where the actor has this rig on them, and the camera is mounted right there. That way, wherever they move, the camera follows them. And this kind of creates this sort of like disorienting kind of feeling. And maybe this character's intoxicated and is going on a massive trip. Well, this is where a snorri cam shot can come in. But what if we want to get a little organic? Maybe more docu style. Well, that's where a handheld shot can come in. Where the camera is just in your hands, and you're essentially going about the scene with the camera in your hand. And this is and often a lot of people, including myself, we often kind of like to shoot handheld because it kind of gives that gritty feeling. There's like an element of organicness to it, and yeah, maybe that'd be handheld. Now, moving on from camera movement, we have the rules. Now, of course, they're kind of more like guidelines. But yeah, at the end of the day, we also have some rules that some of us in the industry would like to follow. No worries, it's just a couple. But just to kick things off, just a very common one is the 180-degree rule. So let's say maybe you're shooting a dialogue scene, right? Maybe you got two people. How do you want to go about filming a sort of scene like that? Well, usually when it comes to something like that, there's something we call a line of action, which is a line that is right where these two people are. And how one would go about using the 180-degree rule is a way to create a sense of spatial continuity, making sure that this character is framed in this side of the screen, looking in that direction, and vice versa from the other way. And this way it helps the audience have a better understanding of where and who the characters are in the scene and things like that. And believe it or not, there's actually different ways you can break the rule too. So yeah, and as long as you're getting creative about it, you can actually break rules. You could do things like maybe cutting away to a different shot, and then cutting back, and then all of a sudden the camera's on the other side, across the line of action. Or maybe you want to move the camera across the line of action during the shot. Maybe it's during like a very pivotal moment, or maybe a new piece of information has been revealed. Or maybe you can cut on the line of action. So maybe the camera's right on the line of action, you could just cut to the other side. Or maybe it's during a pivotal moment. So like, yeah, maybe a big decision has been made, or a very important story element has been revealed. Then boom, you can by all means feel free to break the rule. Hmm? And of course, one last rule. We also have the 30-degree rule. So over here at the 30-degree rule, you guys may be familiar with jump cuts, whereas the camera kind of cuts around and things like that, and the angle doesn't really change. Well, what if you want to make your shot feel less like a jump cut? Maybe feel like a new angle. Well, that's where the 30-degree rule comes in. And so really all it is essentially moving your camera at least about 30-ish degrees to where your subject is. And that way it feels like more of a new shot and less jarring and less of a jump cut. And you could do this through moving the camera, or maybe you want to zoom in a little bit, maybe about 30-ish%. And next up, we got framing guides. So just a couple of little ways you can frame your shot. Feel free to get creative about it. Let's go over some of the basics, some of the most common ones that you may run into. So first things first, we also got the rule of thirds. So for those who may have some experience in photography, or maybe you used a stream camera for a little bit. Maybe you might have noticed that there's a grid that shows up right there. That right there is the rule of thirds, where the screen is divided into a grid of thirds. And yeah, in this way, there's different ways you can frame your shot. And you can do this through like framing your subject, whether completely in one of the boxes, or maybe you want them to take up an entire column of the box, or maybe even you want to frame them right on the line. But what about their eyes? Maybe where do you want to put their eyes? So take the example here from Drive. So right here we have our character there, and you may notice their eyes are right on that top third of that line, and that's a pretty common place that one would frame their shot if you want to do something like that. But yeah, and feel free to get creative. And next up is a pretty unique one, but sometimes you may run into this here and there. You also got the golden ratio. And there's different names for this one. You got the golden ratio, you got the golden spiral, and you also got something called the Fibonacci sequence. But really, at the end of the day, they're both the same thing. A lot of it's just based around mathematics, but we're going to talk about math here. We're talking about spirals. So really, you can frame your shot based around a spiral, and you can even rotate it too, however you like. And it doesn't even have to be one spiral. It could be two spirals too. Maybe you have two people, or maybe have maybe one character and maybe like a certain point of interest somewhere else. Yeah, and by all means, yeah, feel free to get a little creative about it too. Whew. Next up, we got focal lengths. So you may know, if you ever zoom in on your stream camera, or maybe some other asset that you have, that right there is actually changing your focal length. So focal length is like a level of magnification. And now we're going to go over different ways you can go about it. So just to kick things off, we have a wide or short focal length. So for this is where anything is kind of like less than about 35 millimeters per se. And typically with wide angle focal lengths, this kind of gives that more of a three-dimensional feel to an image, because there's a sense of space between the foreground and the background. The background appears a little bit further away. And this can also help with either enhancing or maybe exaggerating motion on the screen. So take an example right here. So the top right here, this is actually shot with like the default presence of your stream camera. And maybe you want to get a little wacky with it too. Well, you can also do ultra wide, where the background's even more further away, and the facial features of your character are more exaggerated, like a fisheye look. And over here in the animated GIF right here, so notice how as I walk towards the camera with a wide focal length, the size of myself changes. I get smaller, but as I walk toward the camera, I get a little bigger. And after wide focal lengths, we also have normal. Not to get too much into it, but it kind of speaks for itself. So it's usually anything between like 35 to 50 millimeter, and this is usually closer to kind of what the human eye sees. So this is nice if you want to have like maybe a more naturalistic or maybe a more grounded feel to your scenes. So this one's getting like a little closer, but not too bad. But it's closer to kind of what a lot of us like to see. And to kind of kick things off, we now have long focal lengths, or telephoto, where the lens is really zoomed in, and now the background feels a lot closer to the foreground, and it also appears to be more out of focus too. And that's because the space is condensed. It has a bit of a more 2D flattish feel to it. And you may notice that the perception of motion is also kind of flattened too. So right here in the animated GIF right here, you may notice as I walk towards the camera, the size of myself kind of barely changes. Doesn't really make too much of a difference. And yeah, and feel free to kind of use that to your advantage. To kind of like feel free to get creative with it in terms of how you want to tell your story when it comes to focal lengths. It's pretty nice. And now we approach some of our final moments. So how do we get started in VR chat filmmaking? Well, just a little heads up. It does what I'm about to get into does kind of require PC. My apologies to those who are on Quest, but no worries. By all means, feel free to follow along. But yeah, at the end of the day, hey, I believe in ya. But before we get into like how to get started, I want to take a moment to give some context. We are currently in a really exciting time in VR filmmaking. We're currently in a time where a film that's been made in virtual reality can now be seen on a massive streaming platform like HBO Max. We are living in a time where a film that can be made entirely in virtual reality or here in VR chat can now be screened at prestigious film festivals like Raindance in particular. And so like with every year, with every film, with every project, we're constantly pushing bounds as to what is possible when it comes to storytelling on this platform. So how do we go about it? Well, here, how about I show you a few things? So at the end of the day, it comes down to your recording software and whether you use something like OBS Studio, or maybe use Shadowplay, or maybe use something like Streamlabs. It all comes down to the software that you use. Now, for me in particular, I often like to use OBS Studio. But for me personally, it kind of gives the most flexibility and versatility in terms of like the feature that it offers, and also it's free. And without getting too much into frame rates, usually when it comes to filmmaking, the standard cinematic frame rate is usually about 24 FPS. For those of you who are overseas, maybe in the European areas, you guys actually have your own cinematic frame rate being 25 FPS. Yeah, feel free to choose whichever you like. And over here in the screenshot right here, this is kind of like my basic setup for filming in VR. And you may notice that it's actually pretty bare bones. Not too much going on. But I also happen to use a plugin of mine. And this over on the top right. So that right there is called Color Monitor. Now, it's actually a free OBS plugin. Now, without getting too complex, it basically what it does is that it helps me monitor my exposure. So that way I can better gauge as to what's maybe overexposed or underexposed, or maybe too bright or too dark. As well as get a better idea of color in my image. Think areas that are maybe very saturated or things like that. And next up, we're going to talk about the stream camera. Now, the stream camera is actually a very powerful tool. In fact, it's a lot more powerful than it was way before. And so feel free to kind of use this to your advantage. Feel free to get creative. Feel free to kind of explore what the stream camera can offer. And you don't always need something like VRC lens to be able to accomplish your storytelling. Believe it or not, the stream camera is a very capable tool. But yeah, you could do things like flying around your camera for drone shots, or maybe changing your depth of field, or your focus. Maybe you want to get creative with some VFX and things like that. Well, the stream camera also happens to have some built-in filters to save some time, and maybe you want to use a multi-camera setup. Well, you can do just that with the pin system. I actually used the pin system on a podcast I was a camera operator for. And while it may be limited in some areas, it's actually a very capable tool. And feel free to kind of use it to your advantage too. And so speaking of VRC lens, there's actually a lot of tools that you can use when it comes to telling your story in VR. Now these are only just a few handful, because there's actually a lot that we can cover. But just to kind of kick things off, we have VRC lens. think about VRC lens as the stream camera, but really cranked up to 11, where it fully expands on a lot of the features, like being able to see what focal length that you're using, being able to control your picture profile, being able to have more control over your drone shots and how you move your camera around and things like that. And maybe you want to, and speaking of moving the camera, maybe you want to program your shot. Well, you also have something like the camera animation system, being able to place down waypoints or almost like keyframes throughout your shot, something very precise to accomplish what you're looking for. Maybe you want to get creative with lighting, and maybe the lighting in the world can be maybe a little bit more fitting to your scene. Well, you also have something like the VRC lighting rig, as well as the VRC camera shy shader, being able to hide your filming avatar from view. And huge shout out to Peach Bite for being able to make it possible for everyone. It's really, really awesome for her. and also mention the color monitor and being able to control how your image looks. And there's so much more. There's a whole lot more to explore. And yeah, feel free to kind of browse around and get creative. And of course, we also have the internet. There's a lot of resources that one can go to in order to learn a lot more about the craft of filmmaking. To start things off, we have eye candy. So a lot of those animated GIFs that you've seen during this presentation, they were all animated GIFs from eye candy. So eye candy is a website where you can have an entire visual library of different techniques and things like that presented as animated GIFs. And this can be really, really great for being able to find references. Maybe you want to work with your team and better describe to them the kind of shot that you're going for. And this is where eye candy can come in. It really, really does come in handy. Next up, we got Studio Binder. Studio Binder is a really nice website for being able to learn a lot more about the craft of filmmaking. Not just cinematography, but also things like directing or producing or writing and sound design, things like that. And their YouTube channel is a wonderful resource to get started. Really, really awesome. And speaking of YouTube channel, we have Every Frame a Painting. Now, Every Frame a Painting, they may not make videos anymore. However, their videos are still publicly available to everybody else, and I still consider them to be one of the all-time best resources when it comes to learning more about the film form. And a lot of their videos from Every Frame a Painting, they actually have been used in film schools, including my own. And it's really, really great. I highly do recommend it.
Alex, go to control panel.
And so to kind of cap things off, a little bit of words of wisdom, because there's a lot that we covered. At the end of the day, there's no such thing as too much pre-production. Always be sure to plan your stuff as much as you can. And don't forget to be safe. Feel free to plan out your shot lists, plan out your schedules, really work with your team to being able to make things as smooth as possible. But of course, speaking of preparation, there's a little something called Murphy's Law. And that saying goes, anything that can go wrong will go wrong. No matter how much preparation that you do, there's always going to be something that goes on set. So really, at the end of the day, just roll with the punches. Feel free to let loose. Really embrace those happy accidents, because sometimes something may happen on set that, while it may not be expected, can actually lead to something really cool. And also, filmmaking is a collaborative process. While you can definitely make a film on your own, but it's also just really great to be able to work with to be able to work with your friends, being able to work with people. And so feel free to bring your friends. Maybe join some groups, maybe some filmmaking groups here and there. Feel free to get really involved.
We didn't know what it was, so it was like.
And maybe talk to some people whose work you admire, and maybe you might be able to maybe they might be able to learn a thing or two, and they might be able to learn from you too, and you'll be able to make some really great friends. But of course, above all else, don't forget to have fun. Because when you're having fun, some of your best work truly shines through. And I've my time here at Portal Media, I always feel really, really grateful and very thankful for everybody that's willing to take time out of their day to become involved in these kind of projects and just tell a story that's just only one of a kind. And so, with all that being said, that concludes our workshop. And I'm also opening up to Q&As. If any guys maybe have any questions here and there, I know I only just presented only a glimpse of some of the various things that you can do in filmmaking, and so I really do appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for coming out here. It does mean a lot to me. And if you guys really like what we do, and maybe you'd like to support us, our Ko-fis are right up here as well. Myself, Project Communities, Portal Medias, and things like that. Maybe you want to stay tuned with what we're up to. Feel free to stop by on over on Twitter and X and things like that. Maybe you want to chime into our groups. Our VRC groups are right here, and our Discord servers are right there as well. And yeah, thank you guys so much for stopping by. It really does mean a lot. And by all means, I hope you guys are having a wonderful festival this year. And get creative. Oh, thank you guys. But yeah, if you got yo, right ons. Yeah, if you guys have anything, if you guys like have any questions, things like that, like definitely feel free to let me know. And maybe you guys want to like a PDF version. Oh, thank you so much, Yuki. Oh, yes.
I was just wondering, where can I watch?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if you're ever curious to check out the stuff that Portal Media has done, feel free to stop by our YouTube page at VRC Portal. It's Portal Media Films. And I probably should put that up there. But you can also find it in my bio as well. Feel free to click on me in my bio. Our Portal Media YouTube page is right there if you're ever curious. And maybe you want to check out some other VR chat films too. So for those of you who may be on PC, just a heads up, it is a PC only world. There is a world called VFI Cinema where they have a whole playlist of VR chat films that have been made here on the platform, and it's really cool. Some really nice stuff here and there, including some of our films too. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.